All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to talk about systems and models as topic 1.2 today. So as we get started, I want to remind you that I'll upload the slides themselves to our Google website. That needs to be bookmarked on your computer and you need to be visiting it regularly. I will also upload the screencast and save it on ManageBack. I'll send it to you on ManageBack, but it will be on the website permanently so that it'll always be there if you need to go back. Remember, since this is a screencast, you can pause to write things down, and you can always go back if you need to. So what is a model? In class, we created a model of the mystery tube. So our mystery tube was this interesting functioning thing at the beginning or at the front of the classroom. And we saw in some ways it behaved slightly unpredictably. So our goal was to create a simplified model of that. Um, with some groups, I saw that people actually struggled to create the model. So it can be extremely challenging to create models because we don't always have all of the information, and it can be very challenging just to put together the information that we can gather from our observations about a system. Additionally, in the other class, I noticed that a lot of people came up with this same solution, though there is more than one correct way to make the mystery tube. So there's more than one model that can be created and function 100% correctly. So now that we have some experience building models, we're going to look at what a model is. So a model is basically a simple representation of a natural phenomenon. So models are unbelievably common in science, and sometimes people forget that they are just models. They're not real. So if we look, the first one on this list is the model Earth. So this is very common. You'll see it in every earth science textbook. It's a cross section, or it's the Earth with a cross section taken out of it so that we can see these different layers. So even though we have this information, or this is the representation that we use of the Earth and its interior structure, no one has ever traveled to the center of the Earth to see this. So we've gathered lots and lots of information based on mostly earthquakes and also volcanoes, and some people mentioned, they could observe other planets as well. All of those things are true, but our primary information that we have to support this model of the Earth is earthquake data based on their primary and secondary waves emitted by an earthquake. So they built this model even though we've never seen the inside of the Earth. The second one is a model atom. So this is an image or a representation of it's a representation of an atom, so it's just a model. If we could take a picture of an atom, I'm sure it would be insulted by this model or this representation, because I'm sure that they don't look anything alike. On the far side, on the right, we have a model animal cell. So every single biology student, just about everywhere on the earth, learns about this model of the animal cell. But it's just a model, so it's not accurate to represent all animal cells. So I brought this up. Right? These are all images, so actual microscopic images of animal cells. And this is muscle fiber, this is, a nerve, and these are red blood cells. So all of these cells vary significantly from our standard animal cell model. So one of the things we have to consider when we build models is, even though they can be extremely helpful and help in allowing us to understand challenging concepts, they also tend not to be 100% accurate because they simplify the information that we have. And this is kind of a silly activity, but this is a simplification of an image of a person. It's a caricature, it's a cartoon. The question was just, who did we think this was? Okay. A lot of people said Shakira, by the way, which I can totally understand. But this is supposed to be Beyonce. So when we simplify, I'll go back, I'm sorry. When we simplify, we lose some really important information. So we're looking at systems. So a lot of the models we will be looking at in this class represent complicated systems, especially when we're moving into our next unit. So our next unit is all about ecosystems and ecology. And there are many ways that we represent ecosystems and ecology with models. So we'll be looking at models of systems. So a system is just a group of smaller parts that work together to make a more complex whole. So we could think about all the different parts in your car engine working together to make your car move and function. We'd also think about all the smaller little parts to your body system. So if we're looking at your cardiovascular system, we could think about things as small as your just individual cells, or we could be looking at tissues and organs as well that help the entire cardiovascular system function together. And when we look at something even larger, like an entire forest ecosystem, there's even more parts to consider. The things can get quite complicated quite quickly. So there are three main types of systems. So first type is an open system. So this means that things go into and out of the system. And it can include energy and matter. So energy moves into the system, energy moves out of the system, and matter moves into the system and out of the system as well. So if we think about people are open systems, right? We exchange energy and matter, right? So we gain energy by eating. We expend a lot of energy as well that we use, but we also emit energy as heat. We are consistently consuming matter, so we eat and we drink, and we emit waste as well in the form of matter. Okay, not to mention additional gas exchanges through the process of respiration. So then there's closed systems. Closed systems can exchange energy, but they do not exchange matter. So this says that matter can cycle internally. So let's say we're looking at a forest. Okay, so we're looking at a forest. There's trees, a broadleaf forest with broad leaves, and within that forest, we can see that matter can recycle itself. An example of that would be in the autumn, when the leaves fall down to the forest floor, we get this buildup of detritus. So we get this like waste, this leaf litter on the surface of the forest floor, and it will break down over time. So other organisms and like bacteria will help decompose that matter, and it'll be able to cycle again through the system. So once that material, let's say carbon and nitrogen within the leaves, is broken down, it'll be available again within the soil so that other organisms can use it. So it's not leaving that area, it's still in the forest, but we're just able to reuse that same matter. Then there's this isolated system. So an isolated system says that there's no matter and no energy exchanged, period. Oh, that should be a D right there. So no matter and no energy is exchanged, not exchanges. So a question, just a thought question, is which type of system do you think is most common in nature? Open, closed, or isolated? I'll have you answer that, and we'll definitely be talking about it in coming weeks. So take a minute, write down what you think and why, and then start the video again. So there's a general procedure for creating a systems model. They have a few different parts. So systems models generally contain storages and flows. Okay, flows is rather general, but storages is a place where energy or matter stays for a while. It's stored there. Okay, like you put food in your refrigerator, store it for a while. And then there's flows. So flows just refers to energy or matter moving around within the system. So we get inputs. Inputs are just the arrow pointing toward the storage. Outputs are, the arrow moving away from that storage, whatever the storage might be. So if you think about an input, oh, there's my mouse. There's my mouse. An input might be, if you're thinking about you buying groceries and putting your groceries into your refrigerator storage, and then if this is still your refrigerator storage, you're removing your groceries or food items, to get ready to eat or cook. Okay, perfect. So now there's more information about these flows. So flows can be a variety of types. So a flow can just be a transfer. That means energy or matter is moved from one location to another, but it doesn't change forms. So that could be Water. So when it rained a lot the other day, there was water flowing through the street and then eventually making its way into the river. So that would be a flow. It didn't a flow and it would be a transfer flow because it didn't change form, it was just moving. Other examples are water can percolate through the soil, so it can flow from the surface down into the soil into something called an aquifer. So that's a stored zone of water under the surface of the earth. People also remove that water from the aquifer when they build things like wells. In fact, most people on Earth actually depend on groundwater in these aquifers for fresh water to drink. So they don't usually depend on things like rivers or lakes or that surface water. They really depend on groundwater. The other thing we might think about is these convection cells that occur on the surface of the Earth that just move some of the heat energy around. So move the heat from the surface of the Earth. Okay, so looking at the atmosphere. So if the atmosphere is heated on the surface of the Earth, then some of that heat will get carried up toward the outer levels of the atmosphere as well, before it cools and then falls back down. There are also flows that are considered transformations. So transformations means that the energy or matter changes forms. So that means that it's different, okay? So it's no longer just water flowing from one zone to another, but something has happened to those molecules or to that energy to make it different. So if we consider consumption, so if you eat something like starch, starch is a large carbohydrate, so it's a polysaccharide. It is a huge molecule. So if you eat gnocchi, you're eating this starch. The starch is not directly used within your body. So you actually have to take the starch, digest the starch, you have to break it down into glucose, and glucose is the type of energy that can move into your cells within the body. Okay, so there's a transformation. It's not just starch. A whole starch molecule couldn't fit into the cells in your body. Then even if we zoom into our cells, glucose, so that molecule glucose, is not directly used within our cells either. It has to be transformed into ATP, which is used within the cells. If we look at our image over here, here we're talking about the transformation of radiation or solar energy into chemical energy or carbohydrates, which occurs in the process of photosynthesis in all producers. All right, so looking at our whole ecosystem model, we're first looking for inputs from outside of this immature forest ecosystem. So the first thing I'm looking for are those arrows in. So I see light energy coming in. I would assume, because we're talking about a forest ecosystem here on Earth, that this is light energy traveling in from the sun, from solar radiation. Here we could see food brought in. This, I might think that would include things like um, maybe things that are carried by wind, or water allows something to flow through that's edible, or maybe one of our organisms, one of our animals wanders out into another zone and then brings food back into the system. And then it says what are outputs. If we're looking at our whole ecosystem model, well, I see that some matter, so some nutrients, are removed by wind and water, so just carried out of the ecosystem. I also see that it says heat respiration. This is just referring to energy lost, okay, in processes within organisms. Then our whole ecosystem model. So looking at matter and energy stored, well, I'm looking for all of these units. Okay, there's circles here, P for producer, C1 for primary consumer, C2 for secondary consumer. We also see storages here, detritus, we have this storage nutrient pool, we have decomposers over here as well. So all of these things are considered storages. If we're looking at transfers, so remember, transfers are things moving, okay, so moving, but not necessarily changing forms. So in that case, we are looking for things like this. So this removal of wind and water or remove a